it was all very gradual. Like it went from believing and rejecting to not believing and trying to like find a solution. And I was saying like it was by the grace of God that I was able to stay out of that pit while still being on the street corner saying that Christianity's stupid and the Bible's fake. And I still kept improving again by the grace of God to a point where I was okay enough to not want to actively end it all. Yeah. But I would have been okay with it ending, it being life.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Shaping the Code. What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture podcast. Hope all is well with you all, family. Listen, we got a good one today. We've got family, a friend on the podcast. This is his first time. I don't know if it'll be his last time. We got the man, the myth, the legend. He's got a heart of gold. He's a good friend, super sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. An incredible team member, serves at our church, Perazim, on the hospitality team. You're greeted by that smile every Sunday. We got the one and only Yavis with us. What's good, bro?
How's it going? Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's going good. Had a good day today.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
Despite
awesome.
some hiccups, but yeah.
We made it.
It's
late here as we're recording this episode, so it's the end of not just a work day, but the day itself. So thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, your schedule to come and bless us with your presence and your story.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Look at that hairline. That's what I get jealous every time I see him, bro. I'm like, God, I see what you've done for my brother right here. But no, it's so great to have you. And what I want to do today, the reason why you're on the podcast is because you have a really, 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 really dope story. I think everybody's testimony is incredible. I think God has saved all of us from incredible things. But it's just kind of been a joy to witness your journey and to see where God has led you and brought you out of and brought you into. And so we're gonna jump into your story today and talk about that stuff. But before we jump in, for those who don't know who you are, don't have a context for who you are, give the people some context. Let them know who Yavis is.
Well, he's already said my name a bunch of times, so I won't do that.
Yeah. Tell us what it means. What does Yavis mean?
It means to make difficult or to be painful. And it's the name Yavis or Jabez pronounced in English his name only has like a few verses in the Bible, and it's in Chronicles, or 2 verses might be. And his mother gave him that name because saying that she bore him in pain. And so I just imagine her referring to Yavis, like calling him. That's how it's said in the Hebrew, Yavis. Yeah. And just saying difficult, painful, come over here. But Yavis prayed out to the God of Israel and said, "Oh, blessing that you would bless me, that you would enlarge my territory, that your hand would stay with me, and that you would keep me from evil so that it wouldn't harm me." And so before that, it said in Chronicles, Yavis was more honorable than his brothers, and then went on to his prayer, and that the Lord answered his prayer. And there's actually a city, I think, in Israel right now called Yavis. Yeah. And so his territory was indeed enlarged. Dang. And God's hand was indeed kept on him. So
dang. That's dope.
Yeah.
That's really dope. So I'm assuming they named you that for the latter, not just for the the meaning. Yeah.
Ironically, my mom did give birth to me in more than the standard amount of pain.
Oh,
way more. So
no. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that everything went well.
Smoothly. Yep.
Yeah. Eventually, I should say.
Yeah, eventually.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's cool. I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's why. That was like the meaning behind the name or anything like that. Yeah. So thank you for that context. But yeah, tell us some more. Like, where did you grow up? What do you like to do? All of that good stuff.
So I grew up in Ethiopia. I went from kindergarten to 12th grade, pretty much in the same school. I changed when I was in first grade to a place called Bingham Academy. I don't know if some people might know about it.
Yeah.
After that, all throughout high school, was playing a lot of sports.
Yeah.
Did tennis on my own time. My mom put us into tennis classes when we were, my brother and I. So I have one brother. Name is Sammy. You're very familiar with him.
Shout out to Sammy. Yep. Yeah.
He is married now, 2 kids.
It's crazy. I remember when he was single, just a bachelor out here in these streets.
Yeah, it was not a dangerous time.
Dangerous time. But God also has his hand on his life.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
We love you, Sammy. Yeah.
So yeah, she put us into tennis classes at a very young age, and at I think early high school or maybe late middle school, she started sending me off to tennis camps at Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Wow.
For the summers. And so we do like 5-hour training sessions and then 3-hour practice matches with one another, and that would last about a month and a half or a month. And so I was doing soccer, I was playing a lot of sports at school, and then I graduated and came to St. Olaf, and that very much felt like God's hand at the time when I was explaining to people in college why I came to St. Olaf, because that's a big question for internationals, like why a small school in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like up north.
Yep. It's I think like 40 or 50 minutes from the cities.
Yeah.
And at the time, since I was an atheist, we'll get into that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I would say, it just felt like the universe was calling me to this place, because my sister-in-law, Brandy, was telling me that St. Olaf has a really good pre-med program. My physics teacher was telling me about it. My Spanish teacher's husband was telling me about it. And then they came for a college fair there. And I'd only really pretty much had Minnesota to choose from, because my brother went here, and random school from middle of nowhere again, less than 3,000 people total in the school. Sheesh. And they would just come to Ethiopia for a college fair. I thought, what are the odds? Wow. And I met with the counselor that was there, and she was very nice. So I decided.
That's crazy. They came all the way to Ethiopia.
That's what I'm saying.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty impressive. Yeah.
And so I decided to go to St. Olaf, in large part because of God's hand in it.
Yeah.
And now knowing in hindsight, but also because of like their program as well, like their sciences program is really good.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed my time. I went to college there. I graduated not too long ago, last May.
Wow. Yeah.
And now I am working at a research lab in the University of Minnesota.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, dope. That's really cool. Yeah, I actually remember you would, like, when you were in high school, you would visit.
I did, yeah.
Like over the summer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's when I would see you, like, at church and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then I remember you share that you'd be moving here for school. But because I think St. Olaf is like a little bit further out from the cities, we didn't really get to see you a lot.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until you like graduated college that I feel like we were able to do life together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool. And so many connections with, I grew up with your cousin Aiden, knowing her since we were kids. We're actually going to get her on the podcast. We've been plotting for the last like 5 years. It just never works out. But yeah, that's really dope to hear that like St. Olaf came to Ethiopia. I didn't know that. That's actually wild to think about.
Right.
When you were in college, so actually before we get into college, I'm assuming that you grew up in a Christian household.
Oh yeah, I did.
And Ethiopia culturally is a bit different than America. Faith is a little bit more accepted. People aren't so hostile towards it. It's a lot more traditional as far as like values go. Tell us a little bit about like your upbringing there. Like growing up, did you love the Lord? Growing up, did you enjoy church? Would you say that like you were following Jesus with all your heart, or like even then, did you have your doubts, your wrestles, your questions? Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I grew up pretty like spiritually attuned. I would say, not like Ouija boards and crystals and stuff, but like God spiritual. And I obviously had doubts as anyone else would, and I went through those seasons and everything, but I would have dreams. I had like a lot of spiritual encounters as well, both positive and negative. A lot actually, and so much so that when I did like renounce my faith at some point, I wasn't fully able to renounce the experiences that I had. So I came to the conclusion, okay, I know that there's something out there that's not natural, that's supernatural. I just don't know what it is, and I don't think it's associated with the God of the Bible. But growing up, I went to a Christian school, so Bingham is a Christian school, and every Fridays we'd have chapel, so there would be that. I was very plugged into the church there, Beza International Church.
Yeah, shout out Pastor Z.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
He's the main pastor there.
Yeah.
And I was going to youth groups on Friday. I was at some point I became like an ushering leader at the youth group. I was ushering at the main service as well. And I remember many moments where I had like very real, tangible encounters with God, and I was wholeheartedly pursuing for the most part. But there was also like, it was intermingled, like sort of the judicial aspect of religion that we all know and love so much, was intermingled with the grace and the love that God has. Yeah. And so the grace and love would pull me in, and the other aspect of me missing out, because I had grown up in such a like Christian household, and my mom was very much the pioneer of that, because my dad is not too religious. And so she would really instill in us all these like habits and virtues, and she would bring us to church every Sunday without fail. Before we started going to Beza, we were going to a church called Golden Chapel, and every Sunday my brother and I would be dragged out of the house no matter what condition we were in. And so she
you're
really
gonna get this word.
Exactly. And she was operating off of the word that says, train up your child in the way that he should go, and he will not depart from it. And so she would recite it to us. I'm like, why are we doing this Sunday? Like, do you know how much else there is? There's like a dinner or a lunch or a gathering, or I have homework or whatever. But she would recite to us this verse. And so we grew up in the church. But yeah, I think,
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you said something so powerful. Even though at one point in your life you walked away or renounced the faith, you didn't really know what to do with your experiences, both like positive and negative. So even though like you rejected the God of the Bible, you had an understanding that the supernatural world was real. You had seen enough to be able to know like there's more than what meets the eye. If it's too personal, you don't have to get into it, but like, what would you say some of those experiences were? And maybe you could share the positive one if the negative one is like too spooky or whatever it is. But what did you experience growing up that made you realize, dang, there's something out here. There's something more than the physical, the material world.
So like, I'll start from the outside in. So things that I had seen that I had not necessarily experienced myself, in the sense that like I hadn't seen supernatural manifestations of it, but I had seen practices of the negative. I'll start with the negative from the outside in. And so there would be, in Ethiopia, a lot of households would have like house helpers, and people who would either travel in and leave and go home, or they would just stay with you there. And some of them, again, orthodoxy, I'm not really trying to shoot it out, but like it's intermingled with not just orthodoxy, but just religion in general, like witchcraft and everything is really intermingled in there. And it's so subtly like layered underneath that it's kind of hard to distinguish what is what, and where witchcraft starts and ends, and where Christianity starts and ends. And so they would practice some rituals. For example, one would be where they would bathe and they would buy a goat. Mind you, this is 2-3 months salary. They're buying a whole goat. They would drain it of the blood, collect the blood, and like bathe in it.
Oh my gosh.
And then they would have like charcoal and everything, and like roll around in the charcoal while still bloody. And so the charcoal and the dark, black coal would seep into their skin, and the blood is drying off. So you can't really see that much. It just kind of looks like ash. You're not really distinguishing the blood. and then they would carve like with like a burning coal, like symbols and markings on themselves. And I would see some of our house helpers just like dark and muddied, and with like symbols and scars on their hands and stuff like that after taking like a vacation for a week or two, and having come back from like rural Ethiopia. And so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like chicken heads thrown onto our property and everything. And so there's a lot of like practice going on that I'm seeing. And so if that was it, maybe I could deny. They're also delusional. I was delusional. I could kind of write it off like that. But the things that I had experienced, I would, from an early age, I feel like I was seeing a lot of spiritual activity. I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and see somebody, like my brother and I would stay in the same room up until I think he went to college. And so like I'd wake up, both of us are in the room and he's sleeping, he's not waking up, and I'd see somebody looking, like staring at us. And it was a woman, and we would stare at each other. I would be too terrified to move, stare at each other for hours and hours, because I would close my eyes and pretend to sleep and then open them again. She's still there. There was instances like that. There was one instance, the most drastic one I would say was here, where I was trying to go to bed and I was awoken by somebody's, later I found out it was the figure of a woman going up against my ear and opening her mouth, and it sounded like an audio playback if you got like a massive JBL speaker and just like held it up against your ear and played an audio track of like what 1,000 people suffering would sound like. And that like jolted me from like the kind of like about to sleep kind of state that I was in. And I was fully awake at that point, and that had gone on for about a minute or two. And I was still looking around. The sound filled the room. Like it was like bouncing off of walls. It was very much real. And then she closed her mouth and the audio stopped, and she got on top of me. And so I was on my stomach.
Oh my gosh.
And somebody physically, again, I was awake, physically got on top of me. I sunk down. And she started like pushing down on my back as well. And since I was on my stomach and the pillow was on my throat, it started cutting off like air circulation, and there was a lot of grunting. I'm thinking that she was scratching herself. Again, I couldn't see what was going on because I was still pretending to be asleep. And so all of that was happening. This was about like an hour-long endeavor. But
oh my gosh, an hour. Yeah.
So that happened in the morning. Again, there was no one at home, running back and forth upstairs. There were times where I feel like I've walked through spirits and had all the strength and life sucked out of me and just crumbled and fainted, and other things as well. So there were a lot of instances like that that I had experienced. So I couldn't really write them off. But
how do you write something like that off? That's intense, bro. That would freak me out. I actually had a situation not too long ago where I had something similar, not exactly the same, but like just feeling like somebody was pushing me down in my bed. It was at night, and I was sleeping, and I woke up to like the pressing. Well, this is actually like November. I was telling our lead team, November, December, it just like trying to get up, and then if I said Jesus, and then it just like disappeared. And then shortly after, I felt like a finger like approaching my neck.
That's crazy.
And then as soon as it like touched my neck, there was like a spark and immediately disappeared. And what it felt like, I'm still discerning and praying through what this was, but it almost felt like somebody was trying to take my voice. Like somebody was trying to take my vocal cords.
Goodness.
And I like prayed about it, brought it to the lead team. We're like, yo, and you know, as Perazim has been growing, things have been changing, and we were just like, yo, as God is doing things, even with this platform and podcast, as God's blessing this, I've felt like, man, maybe there's like some resistance, some like pushback, and so, but like that right there is wild. That those stories that you shared. So like, help me understand. Like, so you had those experiences growing up, and then you moved to the States to go to St. Olaf. And then, you know, a lot of people talk about how like people walk away from the faith because of college. You know, people want to get caught up in the party life, the drinking, the drugs, bad influences in your life. Was that kind of like the beginning? Was that your story? Is that like what led you away from the faith? Or what if there was a, you know, an experience? Was it like a intellectual like wrestle? Like what was the thing for you that made you be like, all right, I'm going to like step away. I know I have these experiences, but I no longer subscribe to the Christian faith. Like what was that for you?
Well, short answer is yes, all of the above. But in terms of like the world and wanting to party,
Sorry.
no worries.
Just trying to get comfortable.
In terms of like wanting to party and drugs and drinking and everything like that, I had already pretty much started in high school, and so that was the aspect of like where the tension started for me. It was being so devoted and everything, and just looking out into the world and being like mesmerized and feeling like I was missing out, and the validation that I thought I would get from going out and everything like that. And this is all, I'm sure me telling somebody in high school with the same feelings, like you will not get validation, will fall on deaf ears. But you know, it's really only with hindsight and by the grace of God that I'm able to look at that now and really be repulsed. But
but at the time you were just trying to like, you know, find identity, get validated, find a true sense of self, worth, all of that.
But I was also very much depressed at that time.
Gotcha.
So I would go to like tennis practice without having eaten lunch and get everything out of my stomach, go to a restaurant, down a couple cocktails, just to like numb it, right? Numb the stress. For me, my depression started from anxiety and stress and worry. And it started when I feel like I can pinpoint where the thoughts started. And it was one of those like walking through a spirit moment where instead of like collapsing, I had like reverberating thoughts of like kill yourself, end it all and everything like that. And my friend and I, who were in chemistry together, who were in A-level chemistry. I don't know if people know about A-level chemistry, but it's not ideally fun. At least it wasn't for us. And we'd be like stacked and overweight, weighed down by a lot of homework. And we just say like, I should just drink bleach or something like that in passing.
Wow.
And I noticed at some point I started meaning it, because I'm like, I can't think of a way out of this. I need to end it. That's the way out. And so I was saying these things and I started to mean it. And there was the underlying anxiety and depression and everything like that. And so it compounded into the going out, drinking, clubbing, and all of that, and drugs. I was out in the world. I was really there. And so at the same time, I was in the church serving, being an ushering leader at the youth group, serving at the main church and everything like that. But aside from that, it was like going into college, it was the lasting effects of the depression that really made me kind of like break, as well as the academic way of looking at scripture that posed a lot of questions that I don't think I was in a position to hear and ask myself. And the thoughts were, God, I have asked you and cried myself to sleep to take away this depression and sadness and hopelessness that I feel. It wasn't just sadness, it was like a pit of hopelessness that I couldn't imagine a way out of. And so like, how long am I supposed to stay here? How long? And then there was the questions added on top of it, and then the desire to go out and be in the world. And the breaking point was the depression. Like I remember it was late freshman year, thinking to myself, it hurts more to hope for respite from this hopelessness that I feel than it would hurt to just release myself into the hopelessness. And it wasn't even renouncing the belief that, oh, maybe God isn't real. I knew even at that time that God was real, but the prayer was, or the thought was, me saying out loud, even if you were to come down here and reveal yourself as God in the flesh with my eyes seeing it, I would still reject you. And it was a real anger and real frustration. And so at that point, for a while, I still believed in the God of the Bible, but I hated him as nearly as much as I had hated myself at that time.
Bro, you said so much there. So if I'm following your story, it all started with you looking for value and a sense of belonging, and like you wanted to be validated, and in wanting that, it just introduced you to a lifestyle that opened up the door for you to get into more of a mess.
Exactly.
And then what ended up happening is like school got difficult, and that brought about anxiety, which brought about some more cycles of like just bad habits, you know, to try to cope with that. And then like depression emerged as a result. And then what furthered it was you're getting older now. You've got some apologetic questions. You're trying to make sense of God theologically, philosophically, intellectually. You're not getting the answers you need, and the depression is growing. And you not feeling like God is responding or hearing your cry, responding to your cry, made you not stop believing in him, but hating him. Bro, because that's a powerful thing to say, because you have to believe in someone to hate someone, right? You can't hate somebody or something that doesn't exist, right? So even your negative emotion was a reflection of like your belief system, and it was real. It's like, Lord, if you are so real, why are you letting me suffer in the way that I'm suffering? If you are who you say you are, come get me out of this pit, rescue me, deliver me from my depression. Bro, like that there is like super deep. And I feel like if we had time, we can unpack all of the intricacies of that. But like, I'm just so interested to hear like what went from you hating him to not believing in him. Like, what was that like? How did it go from, Lord, I know you're real, that's why I'm upset that you're not doing anything, to, you know what? Maybe you're not real. Maybe you don't exist. Like, what was it? Just like the continual pain? Was it a disappointment? Like, was it a question that wasn't answered? Like, what led to you just tipping the scale over altogether?
I wouldn't say it was like a momentary decision as much. Also, in terms of the depression, it was like home life and everything that compounded on top of the school. That made everything feel hopeless, and made the effect that I can have on the things that were happening, like my circumstances, feel like inconsequential. And so if I can't act on my life and change things, maybe in my death I can change things, kind of thing. And so that was the sort of logic. But it went from like logic into like yearning and craving death for myself. And so the transition from believing in God and hating him to not believing in him was a gradual like feeding myself kind of confirmation bias. Like, I don't really need him to be real, right? I have renounced him anyways. And so I was like really feeding on things that would affirm my disdain for God. And so I would, whether that's like academically looking at scripture and supposed fallacies in the Bible and contradictions and everything like that, and just pondering, how is a book that's an amalgamation of other books put together by like the council or a council of Christians way after the fact, how is that their scripture, right? At the time it was there. And so all of these things kind of fed into like, okay, I am fully an atheist because if I'm good this way, I feel like I'm almost better this way than I was then. So yeah,
it's real.
I feel like that was the transition.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. Growing up, my pastor used to say, like, what does it look like to, have your spirit man conquer your flesh? And he gave this powerful illustration of these two dogs that are in your mind wrestling each other, barking and fighting. And it's a daily fight. And he asked the question to all of us one day. He's like, which dog do you think wins the battle, wins the fight? We're like, we don't know. Like, they're two dogs. Like, which one, And he's like, it's the dog that you feed most. And so if you're feeding your flesh is going to overtake you.
Yeah.
If you're feeding your spirit, then your spirit, man, the Spirit of God will help you overcome and walk in the victory that God has already given you and promised you in his Son, Jesus Christ. And when I hear your story, what it sounds like is, because the fight got so real, because you got a little bit tired and you felt despair and felt hopelessness, you decided to feed the part of you that questioned God altogether.
Yeah.
And just one thing led to another. And before you know it, you went from hating him to not believing in him. When me and you have like talked, about your story, something you say that's interesting is you weren't just an atheist. You were an atheist on this journey to prove that God wasn't real.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like one thing to say like God doesn't exist, but it's a whole nother kind of atheist when you've made it your ambition to also prove to Christians that they're foolish for believing. What led to that? Like it's like one thing that you hated him. All right, it's another thing you don't believe in him, and now you become an evangelist.
Yep.
To disprove God. Like, what was it? Just like hey, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. Like I'm better on this side than I was then.
Yeah.
Like I was more in despair when I was a Christian than what was that? Yeah.
So finding myself in a position. So just for my brain's sake, I went from saying, even if you came down here, I would reject you, to not really wanting to get better. So it's a really big thing when people who are depressed and suicidal want to get better. I feel like that's a humongous step.
Right.
But I didn't see the point in getting better. So I had already given up. Wow. And I had planned, again, really, really, really was God's hand. Like, I physiologically should not be alive. And this wasn't like somebody came and saved me. Like, I was unable to like bleed out. I was unable to make plant. Like, I had tried a bunch of times as well.
Wow.
And so I had gone from like that hopelessness to finding some modicum of hope via like a counselor that I had then, who had recognized that something was wrong, and he had forced me essentially to meet with a therapist who had connected me with a psychiatrist who had prescribed me some antidepressants that, again, now looking back at it, most definitely was the grace of God, because I had no side effects, and I had no withdrawal effects when I had just cut cold turkey.
Yeah. And
so all of that got me in a position where I was thinking, okay, so I'm now better. I'm not in a bottomless dark pit that I can't get out of, and I am like working on restructuring my brain. And so the me then was thinking, if I was still a Christian, I would just be waiting on God to change the situation. What are you guys doing? Yeah. Like, I feel like Christianity just teaches you to be complacent with your situation and suffering. And that's like, there's a better way out, guys. Like, Christianity is like breeding martyrs where there shouldn't be martyrs. Like, you are suffering in life for no reason, was the belief, because I had found a little bit like out of that hole, right? And thinking back again, it was really God's mercy that kept me, like, let me stay out.
Bro, I'm getting so excited, because like that's it was the grace of God. That's the thing that, like, as I'm hearing your story, I can't, because it's true of my story. Like, we underestimate how much God is involved in our life. It's like, God, why haven't you done this yet? But like, how many things has he saved us from today? How many things has he provided for us today?
Yep.
I think about David, who wakes up in the morning and thanks God for sustaining him through the night. And we often say, like, we wake up as if we were meant to wake up.
Yep.
Like, we wake up, like, entitled to waking up. And, like, it's not until we get a proper view of God that we can understand, it is only by his grace. It's by his grace that I had a counselor.
Yeah.
It's by a grace that he gave somebody the mind to figure out a solution. It's by his grace that he gave us the raw materials to create the medication, to make antidepressants, depressants, to like fix whatever is going. Like, it's when you really scale back, it was always him.
Yeah.
But it's not until later on you look back that you could actually give him the credit that he deserves.
100%.
But in the moment, you're thinking, this is man, this is not God.
Yeah.
This is science, it's not God.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this at Parazine recently. All truth is God's truth. And so, no. There's nothing in science that God doesn't own. There's nothing in philosophy that God doesn't own. There's nothing. And so sorry, I had to like interject there because that's a word. Yeah. So in the moment, you're thinking though, like these martyrs.
For no reason. You're suffering for no reason. Get out of your own suffering, like work on yourself, actually do something practical.
Right.
I was thinking of something as you were saying, as you were mentioning that word, but it'll come back to me eventually. And so I was really like trying to tell people there's something you can do about your suffering, you know, like you don't have to sit there. You don't have to just take it and just pray to a God that will or won't, because he really doesn't exist is what I was saying. And so that was the transition. It was all very gradual. Like it went from believing and rejecting to not believing and trying to like find a solution. And I was saying like it was by the grace of God that I was able to stay out of that pit while still being on the street corner saying that Christianity is stupid and the Bible's fake. And I still kept improving again by the grace of God to a point where I was okay enough to not want to actively end it all. But I would have been okay with it ending, it being life. And I still found myself after a while very still frustrated with my inability to change myself and the hopelessness that I had felt with circumstance. And it was that transition that kind of actually it was hearing about a version of the gospel that I had never really heard growing up. And it was while my cousins were trying to convert their friend who was a Hindu to Christianity, and he was really the one kind of instigating these conversations, and he was like, I just want to know the truth, guys. And it would be heated debates, conversations most of the time. Other times it would just be questions and, okay, I'm going to do my research and come back to you guys. But I was there. We were playing games, mind you. This was one of the things I wanted to stop doing. And so as I'm playing games with my cousins, and his name is Viv, he's a Christian now. And as I'm playing, I'm hearing passively like what the gospel is and the freedom that it offers. And even though I got to a point where, you know, I was meditating once or twice or 3 times a day, I was reading all the self-help books I can get my hands on, listening to podcasts, philosophical and psychological of all varieties, to try and like shape and mold my brain. I still could not get out of the reality that I was so insufficient. And that I was like truly, truly hopeless. And another thing is the thing that you were saying about like, you know, we take waking up for granted. I think one of the biggest blessings that I've realized having come out of that place is how vile I truly am, like my nature in and of myself, how vile I am and how undeserving I am to wake up. And so I feel like in realizing these things, I'm not able to take any blessing for granted, because I know it's abundantly more than I deserve. Especially after all the things that I said to God about God. All of the, I mean, communing with demons, as I said before. From that end of the spectrum to being kept during that and being so blessed afterwards is really a testament to God's grace.
I wanted to like lean in a little bit. I will definitely talk about the turning point and when like God truly got a hold of your heart. It sounds like you're already getting there with your story, but like whether it's, you know, you talk a little bit about like drugs, communing with demons. You know, I just feel like there might be somebody listening in right now who feels like they're too far from God, or feels like there's no hope, that they are too addicted or too strung out or too messed up or have made too many mistakes, or feel like they've wasted like their life, that this is it for them. Like, can you lean into some of the, if you feel comfortable, like exactly where you were with all of that before, you know, I keep referencing Perazim because you actually go to our church, but one thing we've talked about, you know, we just celebrated Easter, but before Easter, we kept talking about how we're so quick to get to the good part. We're so quick to get to the, he resurrected. We don't sit in his death. We don't sit in the pain. We don't sit. And I think when you are quick to get to the good stuff, you leave people hopeless, because people need to know that Jesus didn't just die, but he took on whatever it is that we were addicted to, dealing with, bound up in, losing sleep over, tormented by. Like that was on him, you know? And we'll get to like how God, you know, snatched you. But like before getting to that, like what did he snatch you from? Like what was the, you were definitely an atheist who was against Christianity, but like in the darkest of, like when you were in your pit, what was that like?
What was that like? I wish I had my old phone. I was writing some things, like trying to describe it, and I feel like the best way that, this is a little corny, but the best way I thought I could describe it was through like poetry. And so I would write about how utterly dark and hopeless and void it was of life. I was, so talking about drugs outside of the prescriptions, right?
So that's not the kind of drugs I'm talking about.
I mean, the prescriptions were many and enough to even talk about drugs, but like there were many before that, and during. Whether, I don't know if I should be listing off drugs, but I was I was on a lot.
Let's just say,
honest to God, I should have overdosed so many times. And this was just recreational. I wasn't even trying to. And just like telling people, I'm like, they're thinking you tripled up on stimulants, took a respiratory depressant, and then just to top it all off, took a couple more stimulants, and you woke up without a hangover.
Wow.
There were times where I would be going to bed and my heart would be beating with so much pressure that I couldn't sleep because my body was moving.
Wow.
Like my heart was moving my entire body. I was addicted to smoking for so many years. I was smoking cigarettes. It started off with just, you know, I smoked like a couple packs a night out. So but then after that, I would just be like, I'm not touching no cigarettes. That's nasty. And then I got to college and I couldn't find myself any weed. And so I looked to the nearest guy that was smoking outside while it was still like a not tobacco free campus. And I was like, yo, I'll pay you $20 for a cigarette.
Wow.
And he's like, dude, don't even worry about it. Take 5. And at that point, I'm like, I can't find any weed. I need something to take the edge off, because I was depressed and stressed, and workload is new to me, you know, everything. And I was just plunged into college as well, because it was COVID, embassy shut down. And so I had to skip a semester. And so I was working with and for my dad the first semester. And so I had went the second semester and I had no orientation, no nothing. I got there one day, the next day was class. I didn't even unpack fully. And so at that point, I had picked up smoking regularly, like a pack a day, a minimum. That's me trying to hold it back. Like, okay, I need to be reasonable with my finances. I can't really afford more than a pack a day.
That's real.
But it would fluctuate in terms of amount. Drinking, oh my goodness. I was it feels like it was just like bottomless. Like I could just chug and chug, and I would be layering stimulants on top of it so that I could kind of curb the depressant effect of alcohol.
Yeah.
And I would be going from, like 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., like copious drinking, and then 3 nights in a row, 1 night break, then 3 nights again. And it would just be a lot of activity, running and like just jumping, you know, club scene.
Yeah.
And I think my body just gave out at some point. And even while I was an atheist, I started hating alcohol because I think my liver just wanted to throw it back up at me.
Right.
And I had like a really bad infection from a hookah that I had. But I was in there. I was really in there. And aside from like, and then there was the prescription drugs. There was they had diagnosed me with so many mental disorders. They were trying to put me on drugs as well as straitjackets.
Wow.
I had to like talk my way out of like, I am not an immediate harm to myself.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we get, I'm not trying to out my mom, but like we got really good at maneuvering conversations and gently guiding people away from a conclusion. And so that's what I was doing with my therapists. I had 3 different therapists, one just normal talk therapist, an immediate danger kind of like emergency therapist that would talk me out of like very psychologist kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there was another therapist that 2 of them were from the school, 1 of them was from a hospital. And then I had 3 other psychiatrists. I had like a roster, a team working on my brain.
Wow.
I had my primary psychiatrist who was able to prescribe me like general things like antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, like stimulants and stuff like that, like Adderall. And there was another one who was a neuropsychologist who would do all my neuropsych evaluations. And after all of these things, I was diagnosed. It was a long piece of paper. He had written an essay, and I don't even know at what point he wrote this essay because it was during our meeting, and he sent it to me right after. I'm like, we were just talking. How are you able to talk and write at the same time like that? Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't even tell you this. I don't know how you assumed. Yeah. But he got it spot on. I mean, like
he did his job.
Yeah. Like there was parts of my story that he just assumed and just inserted. I'm like, that you're right. That did happen. I just didn't tell you that.
Yeah.
So he was good
Context
at his job.
Cues.
Yeah. So then after my diagnosis, they were trying to like, stuff me with a bunch of pills. Luckily, I was terrified of pills and their side effects because of some family growing up that I had seen. And so I had refused a lot of them, and I was talking with my primary psychiatrist about which ones would offer the least side effects and everything like that. But even then, there were still side effects. So I was deep in the trenches.
Bro, you know what's so crazy is like somebody can look at you and just not even know. Yeah. Like even me, I'm getting more details now, but like as we've like met up and you've told me some of your story, I'm just like, no way. Yeah. Ain't no way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, because every time I would see you, it's like fun, it's light, it's laughs. Yeah. And it doesn't take much for either one of us to laugh. So we're always, especially you throw in my brother Bino in the mix, it's just like, we're all just clowning, you know? Yeah. And so like, but who would have known? You know, who would have thought? And I can't help but think about like how it all started with you feeling like God left you. Oh yeah. That was the thing that set the whole thing off. And there's the reason why I'm so glad that we're having this conversation is because like one, God does listen, God is involved, and God is rescuing, God will rescue. Mm-hmm. But second of all, like it's to really highlight that like what we believe or what we fail to believe has ramifications. Like it will lead, it's not just like I think this way about God and then my life is independent of that belief system. No. Like what we believe will either shape our life to follow or shape our life to disprove all of that, right? And so it's just so crazy that it started off as like a cry for help and you not getting that and feeling like God had left you. Yeah. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about how like God started to like woo you in and start winning you over And like, what was that process like? Because you've already mentioned that like you were in the pit, you were in a very dark place, and it got to a point where like you didn't even know what was next, or how to go forward. Like, was that a breaking point? Like, what? No. Okay.
Because my heart was so hard, so hard.
Wow.
Like my family, who was still Christian, knew I was very open about my atheism. As I told you, street corners, yelling at people, not literally, obviously, but to the effect of. And we'd be in arguments, debates, and stuff with one another, and I would resent Christianity and the premise of God more, and be so much more repulsed every time somebody would try and insert it, trying to argue for it, almost to the point of saying like, just because you tried this way, just because you're trying to stuff it down my face, I want to even less. And so it had to be gradual. It had to be so gradual to where I didn't notice. Otherwise, I would have resisted it.
Wow.
Another aspect of the darkness that I was in as well, I forgot to mention, was I was completely apathetic. Like I did not have access to any other emotions than hopelessness, anxiety, and stress, and indifference. Could actually not access it. When my niece was first born, I didn't care. I really didn't care. Like, oh, Nadia's turning. My brother would ask me. I remember there was a specific moment that really like highlighted it. My brother said, Sammy said, "Oh, Nadia's this. What? How are you? Isn't it gonna be crazy when she's in like high school and everything? Like, it would be crazy, right?" I'm like, "Sure, I don't know." And he had been asking me these questions and trying to get a conversation out of me. Mind you, this is after the depression, right? Depression, like the utter hopeless depression. And he asked me, "Dude, where's your soul?"
I could see him asking that.
And I actually tried to answer that question earnestly. I'm like, I didn't realize how like emotionless I was. Like friends would be coming to me for consolation and everything. I couldn't access emotions to be empathetic. Like empathy, I couldn't feel. Compassion, I couldn't feel. Joy, longing, hope for things to come, none of that. Like Nadia turning old and just seeing how she interacts with friends. And I was thinking, I turned to him and I said, I actually don't know. Like I can't care if I wanted to. I couldn't care less. Literally, I could not care less. And so going back to your question, it was very gradual because I was still my heart was still very hard. But just by way of being with my cousins and playing video games together on the PS4, I would be listening, whether I wanted to or not, them argue, and I'll be on the side of the Hindu. Like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. No, that's not what it said there. But what about? So I'll be like arguing with him, right? But I'll be passively listening to this freedom and to this relief from the trying and like willing ourselves to be better and all of that. And I had tried so many things. To get better. Drugs, so we can put that aside, as we've already talked about drugs enough. Be that meditation, different kinds of meditation, different like spiritual. So like with each religion, they have like doctrines that they have and adopt with each of them. And I would try and adopt that. I would try and adopt the most unhealthy, toxic ways of thinking and operating in the world to try and like elicit and will myself into a kind of peace, as well as like a version of me that I wanted. And with all of these things, I won't say they didn't work at all. They just never lasted.
It was temporary.
It was so temporary. Like meditation would only work for so long and to such an extent. And I got to a point where, again, constantly hearing this passively, the freedom and everything like that, and I ran out of strength. Like I was already from a position of no strength, wanting to end it all, give up, finding a little bit, building it, trying to make myself better. And then I ran out of strength in that process. And I just was in the party chat, in the game chat with my cousin, and he was complaining about how angry he was with Viv, again, the Hindu. They're all in the UK, by the way, so I don't really see them.
Yeah.
The only way we connect is through games.
Yeah.
And he was complaining. He's like, he's so dumb, bro. He is so dumb. Every time we agree on something, he's like, okay, that makes sense and everything. He'll come back and call me and say no, and start arguing the same thing with the same. And he was telling me this, so he wasn't even trying to preach to me, right?
Right.
And so I was hearing this, and to somebody who had lost strength to keep fighting, right, to try new methods of like self-betterment, self-improvement, self-help, right? I was like, dang, this is freedom. I don't have to keep trying.
Wow.
Like I can let someone else do that for me.
Wow.
And it'll work.
Yeah.
And their testimonies in and of themselves, like my family and cousins.
Yeah.
Little did I know they were also going through similar times. But that was the realization. So it was very gradual, very, very gradual. And I had to run out of strength, and my heart was slowly softened. But then it was the realization, like, I can breathe. Like, this is actually freedom. Like, he did it for us so that we don't have to.
Come on.
And so that's what kind of drew me back. And then I found myself in a position where I knew I was started accepting. So they were arguing from an apologetic perspective, where they were arguing for the Bible in terms of its validity and Christ's validity. And so there was a lot of like evidence base for that. And so I'm like, okay, I got to a point after hearing them talk about it a lot, like, okay, the Bible's probably real, and the God that it's talking about is probably real. I'm just not a Christian. I'm just not there. Like I don't think I'm still dealing with a smoking issue. I'm still dealing with an addiction to porn, an addiction to all of these things. I understood that, come as you are a concept, but like I can't act it out. I can't even like, I don't know. But like I was thinking to myself, I agree, but not for me. Then I got to a point where that there was a turning point in there. But turning point being like I got stopped by the cops twice in the same week, by the same police officer actually, for speeding. And he recognized me the second time, and it was well over the speed limit. I was going like 55, 60 in a 40. I had a lot of road rage as well, and I was thrilled. I had a lead foot. And so he's like, "Didn't I stop you like 3 days ago? You were with your friends?" I was like, "Yeah." At that point, like I couldn't even give him an excuse, because the other time I was like, I didn't see the transition. I'm like, I had already resigned myself to getting a ticket or whatever. I feel like at that point it would have warranted like get out of your vehicle kind of thing. He took my license and he went to his car and came back and he said, just slow down, okay? And he saw how hopeless I was. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm here. I'm sorry. And he's like, just don't worry. Just slow down next time. And he let me off with a warning both times. And I called my friend who is a Muslim/atheist, who grew up Muslim, but isn't really like practicing. And I was telling him about this. It's crazy. Oh my goodness. He was like, wow, God really loves you. And that was what really pierced my heart. Wow. Like I was already like softened to a point where I'm like, yes, but not for me. Maybe I don't consider myself a Christian. I'll tell my cousins that. They'd be like, what is a Christian to you? Like, are you not understanding what we're saying? Like, that's not it. Like what you think is not it. I'm like, I get it, but it just doesn't feel right. So I was in a state of limbo for a while. And so him saying, my friend saying, God loves you, pierced my heart, and that thorn just stuck there until I got all the way home, and I went to bed, and I had a dream about like the rapture and everything, and it was scary, but it was informative at the same time. And I called my cousin to tell him about it, and he's like, I don't know if he said this to me or it was a feeling that I had, but I feel like the dream was God telling me like, hey, you've been in this weird limbo state for a while. I need you to like lock in. Like I need to prepare you for something. And I said, okay. And so as I was on the phone, mind you, throughout these 4 years of being in college, I did not have access to any other emotions, like I said, than stress, sadness, hopelessness, all of that stuff, right? Though I wouldn't consider myself depressed at this time. In a mixture, like in a cocktail form, not distinct emotion, but all the emotions that I had no access to, that I didn't even know what to feel. Like I had repressed and dissociated so much in trying to deal and cope with my depression that that I just didn't even know I had these emotions left. And so as I was talking to my cousin, all of the emotions that were locked in or locked out or put away rained down or bubbled up. And I felt it all in one go.
Wow.
And so that was the turning point. So yeah.
That's crazy. It's like, it's layered, right?
Yeah.
Because on one end, who would have thought that you just playing PS4, you're not even in the conversation, you're just listening to your cousins go back and forth on Christianity versus Hinduism, and you're sitting there, and unbeknownst to you, God is dropping seeds. And you're like, huh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, he really got him on that one.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
huh, like, yeah, the math is mathing for the Christian right now.
Yep.
And then you eventually got to a point where you're like, I could see how somebody would land there.
Yeah.
It's just not for me.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful because you can acknowledge truth but not own truth, right? So you can say, yeah, this is real, but not align yourself in such a way where it's real for you.
Yeah.
Until God's like, no. This is not just real for your cousin. This is also real for you. And I'm going to show you how this is real for you because my love is not limited to, or it's not only reserved for your cousin, but let me show you how I also love you.
Yeah.
And it's just so unique. This is what I love about our God. God is so specific because I guarantee you, if you were on the phone with your pastor or a family member or a friend who is a Christian and said, God loves you, it wouldn't have landed. But God's like, no, I'm going to use somebody who doesn't even believe in this God to be like, wake up, bucko.
Yep.
Like, do you not like see the miracle in front of you? Because sometimes I think like we forget that we're walking in a miracle, but because we're so caught up in our life, we fail to recognize it. And it takes someone, something, a situation to like slap us back into reality. And for you, God had to use someone who didn't even believe in God to highlight God.
Yep.
That's so boss of God.
Yep. It really is.
Yeah, it's so wild. And then for God to immediately after be like, oh, it connected. Here's a dream.
Yeah.
And then followed by a conversation. And then that begins the journey.
Yeah.
It's so encouraging, man, because it almost feels like it's like he's intentional, huh? Like he's in the details. I hate the quote, the devil's in the details, because I really do believe God is in the details. And he's behind every little. What are the odds that the same officer in the same week catches you and lets you go?
Recognizes me too.
Recognizes you too and lets you go. That reminds me of Romans 3:23. It's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance. It's like God didn't respond to your disobedience. God didn't respond to your recklessness with a speeding ticket, with you getting out of the vehicle, with a felony. Because I think like when you're 15, 20 over, that's like a felony.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Yeah. But instead he responds with his grace.
Yeah.
And I love this. Grace is what God gives us that we don't deserve. And mercy is withholding from us what we do deserve. And in that moment, he displays both for you. He offers you grace and extends his mercy. And it's like the perfect recipe for salvation for you and your heart. Yeah. Bro.
And this is a cop in the middle of like farmland, Northfield, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to protect their, their little town. And so they would have even less incentive to let some like international college student off for speeding that much.
Yeah.
So even then, for the second time, he gave me a warning. So
Angel, bro.
honestly, and there were so many times I should have gotten into accidents because I was a reckless driver.
Bro, that's like, I mean, if we had time, we would talk about all the ways in which God saved you, protected you, you not overdosing when you should have overdosed, you not making it after making some poor decisions that were like very detrimental to your health, after putting yourself in situations that like were not healthy for, like, God reserved you for himself.
Yeah.
And God saved you for himself.
Yeah.
I love, a theologian once said, God, we are saved by God. We are saved by God, from God, for God.
Mm-hmm.
God is the one that saves. And let's get it twisted. God doesn't save us from a cop. God doesn't save us from drugs. God saves us from himself, because his wrath is greater than any of those things. And he doesn't just save us and save us from himself, but he saves us for him. And I hope that that's what this podcast does, is that in telling this story, like, people are able to like receive hope and see the light at the end of the tunnel and believe again and trust that God isn't ignoring them, that God isn't ignorant of what it is that they're dealing with, but he's writing this story. He's putting together this beautiful story that will ultimately increase their faith and draw others to himself. Because that's ultimately what he's doing in your life, bro. Like, I don't feel like anybody could tell you God isn't real at this point. You know, you don't just believe in God because the apologetics make sense, because you have the argumentation for it, because you align philosophically, theologically, intellectually. You have a story. Yeah. And nobody can take that story away from you.
I need God to be real. Yeah. Like, there is no other way. To someone who's lost strength, this is hope like no other. And I have, thankfully, still very much out of strength to keep trying to do and will and all of these things.
You and I both. Yeah. And that will always be our story. Amen. We can't, but he can. Man, I feel like we can sit here and talk for hours. But as we like land the plane and bring this episode to an end, what would be your last just kind of like, you know, encouragement, plea for God, maybe a verse that's on your heart, a story you want to share? Like, how do you want to kind of land this plane as you wrap up telling your story, at least on this episode?
There are a lot of verses that like held me in that time, a lot of verses for peace, and part of me wants to say, you know, if he did it for me, he can do it for you. But it's difficult to take that into its weightiness and to understand who I was and who I am in and of myself without knowing all the intricate details of my life. I should have lost my mind so many times for months on end, hearing like audible voices and not being able to hear other people. But your sin will never ever, like my sin, your sin will never be more than God's willing to forgive, and God already has forgiven. And one thing that I had realized is the verse, I'm not sure where it is, but looking off from worldly things and looking off from your troubles and looking onto Christ. It seems so counterintuitive to like not address our situations and not address our circumstance. Because I feel like that's what's really captivating us and our generation. I don't know if we're in the same generation.
Yeah, we are. I ain't that old. Golly. He said, I'm Gen Z. What are you?
But a lot of the things that's captivating our generation now is like our circumstance and our situation, and looking off from that and looking to our new identity, mainly for Christians to not be so wrapped up in our circumstance, because I feel like that's where I had kind of missed it a little bit. Is I had ruminated and been in my position, and against nowadays when I am in a circumstance that seems unbeatable, I look off from it and look to my new identity, where my life is hidden in, and who seated at the right hand of God in heavenly places, above all things, his spirit, he is in us. And so kind of identifying with our new identity is really the only way out of an unbeatable circumstance that we find ourselves in.
Belief. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Belief. That's good. Man, so many gems were dropped. Man, it's an honor, bro, like doing life with you. It's humbling to like hear what God brought you out of, and then for you to now be in the church, be serving the church, and you, of all places, you serve on the hospitality team, because I just feel like that's I always say that the cross is the greatest demonstration of hospitality. It was Jesus who extended his arms and by his death welcomed all of us into the family of God, and every Sunday you get to do that. You get to like extend your arms and welcome people into the family of God. And what was done for you, now you get to do for others. And it's a joy, man. And it's been awesome. You were in the home group I was leading late last year, and just seeing you're inquisitive. You're hungry for the word of God, for the presence of God, and you genuinely listen. When I'm giving sermons on Sundays, you scan the room and you're always locked in, and I could tell God did his big one. Amen. That God truly snatched you and delivered you and saved you. And when I look at you, I'm reminded of God's power. When I look at you, I'm reminded of God's goodness. And when I look at you, I'm reminded at the very thing that you just said, that there is no sin greater than his grace, that you will never be able to outrun the love of God, ever. That one song that we sing, our sin was great, his love was greater. What can separate us now? What a beautiful name it is. That, when I think of you, I think of that. It's like, man, how gracious and how kind. Yeah. And how gracious and kind of you for you to come on the platform and share your story. I feel like we just scratched the surface. I know we were trying to I know this isn't probably over an hour long, but we're trying to condense it as much as possible. But there's just so much to your story. And my prayer for you is that you continue to share your story, continue to shout from the rooftops all of what God has done for you, and that you would never forget all that he's done for you, because it's truly a miracle.
It really is.
Truly a miracle. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate y'all for joining us this week on Shaping the Culture podcast. Let us know what y'all thought in the comment section. Leave a comment, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, family, peace and grace. Shaping the Culture.